Assalamu alaikum. I am Miss Tehseen Mistry and I welcome you all to the YouTube channel of Anjumana Islam's A.A.K English Secondary School. So students, today we are going to discuss the continuation of one of our grammar topics that we have already discussed earlier. So let us see what the topic is all about. We have already discussed about adjectives and also degrees of comparison. So we know that basically degrees of comparison deals with adjectives, and there are three main degrees of comparison, namely the positive, the comparative and the superlative degrees. But when we talk about degrees of comparison, there are a few rules which we need to remember before we use them in our sentences. So students, remember to follow a few rules whenever you are working with degrees of comparison. So let us start with each rule. Rule number 1, it says that you need to add the suffix "r" for comparative and the suffix "st" for superlative degrees to the words that end in the letter E. So rule number 1 clearly states that whenever you have an adjective that ends with the letter E, so before converting that positive degree adjective to the comparative form, you have to add the letter R after the positive degree adjective, and in case you are planning to convert it to the superlative form, you have to add the suffix st after the positive degree adjective. So let us understand this rule with the help of two examples. So here we have the very first adjective in the positive degree, which is large. When we look at this adjective, we can clearly see that this adjective ends with the letter E and it is in the positive degree. So according to rule number 1, if we want to convert this adjective to the comparative form, we have to add the suffix R after our positive degree adjective. So in the comparative form, large becomes larger. The main adjective remains as it is. There is only one addition, that is the suffix R. Similarly, if we plan to convert this adjective to the superlative form, we need to add the suffix st after the positive degree adjective. So here the adjective large in the superlative degree becomes largest. The main adjective large remains as it is, and there is an addition of the suffix st after the adjective. So here we have the adjective large with its three degrees of comparison. That is, in positive degree, large remains as it is. In the comparative degree, large becomes larger, and in the superlative degree, large becomes largest. Let us look at one more example to understand this rule number 1 even better. So here we have the second example. The adjective here in the positive degree is tame. Again, this adjective ends with the letter E. So before converting it to comparative degree, we will keep the positive degree adjective as it is, and simply after this adjective, we will add the suffix R to make it comparative. So tame becomes tamer. Similarly, to make it superlative, we keep the main adjective tame as it is and add the suffix st after it. So tame becomes tamest in the superlative form. So this is how we convert adjectives from one degree to another, and for that we need to apply certain rules. So we began with rule number 1, where it says that whenever you have an adjective in the positive degree that ends with the letter E, so before you make it comparative, you need to add the suffix R after the positive adjective, and to make it superlative, you need to add the suffix st after the main adjective. So this is rule number 1. Now let us move ahead to rule number. In rule number 2, it says that if the word ends with the letter Y, you have to change the letter Y to I, and then you need to add ER for comparative and EST for superlative. It may sound a bit confusing, but with the help of examples, you will be able to understand this rule better. So let us look at the very first example. The example is heavy. Now, if you look at the word heavy, it is an adjective which is in the positive degree. Now, because this adjective ends with the letter Y, we have to apply rule number 2 over here. So what does rule number 2 say? That if you have an adjective, here the word represents adjective. So if you have an adjective which ends in the letter Y, as we can see in the case of heavy, so before converting it to the comparative form, you first need to remove this letter Y. Remove in the sense you have to replace it with another letter. So we will remove the letter Y. In place of Y, we will write the letter I. And after doing this conversion, we will add the suitable suffixes. So the suffix for comparative in rule number 2 is ER. So heavy becomes heavier. And for superlative, it is EST. So heavy becomes heaviest. Isn't that very simple? Let us look at the second example. The second example is the word easy. Again, easy is an adjective of positive degree. Now here if we look at the word easy, this again ends with the letter Y. So to make it comparative, the first step is that you replace the letter Y with the letter I, and after you have done the replacement, then you add the suitable suffixes. So after we have replaced the letter Y with letter I, for comparative, after the letter I, we will add ER. So easy becomes easier. And similarly, for superlative, after the letter I, we add EST. So easy becomes easiest, right? So here, in the first example, the adjective of positive degree was heavy. In comparative, we converted it to heavier. And finally, for superlative, we made it heaviest. Similarly, in the second example, we had the adjective easy. For comparative, we made it easier. And for superlative, we converted it to easiest. So this is rule number 2. Now moving ahead to rule number 3. Rule number 3 says that when the word has a short sound, the last letter must be repeated before adding ER for comparative and EST for superlative. So let us understand this rule with the help of example. Now here we have the adjective big. We have the adjective big. This is a short sound adjective. Short sound means when you have only one vowel in your adjective. So in this adjective big, we have only one vowel, and that is I. So definitely this is a short sound word, or for that matter we can also call it a short sound adjective. So we have identified the adjective big as a short sound adjective. Now whenever you have a short sound adjective or a short sound word, before you convert it from one degree to another, you have to repeat the last letter. Repeat the last letter means you have to double the last letter. The last letter has to be written twice. So here in the adjective big, the last letter is G. So before we convert it to either comparative or superlative, we first have to write the letter G twice. So after you have written the extra G here after your positive degree adjective, now that you have added the G, now you start adding the suitable suffixes. So for comparative, the suffix we use is ER. So the comparative form of big would be bigger. See here, we have the main adjective big here. We have the extra G, and then for comparative we have added the suffix ER. So this is how you're supposed to convert the adjectives with short sound. Similarly, for superlative, we simply write the last letter twice and then add EST. So big, bigger, and biggest. Right? Let us look at another example. The second example is sad. Sad. Again, this is a short sound word or a short sound adjective. In this adjective, we again have only one vowel, that is A. So since we have a short sound adjective here, before you convert it to comparative or superlative, the first step that we do is we will write the last letter twice. So before converting the word sad to comparative or superlative degree, you need to add that extra D after the word sad. Then for comparative, you will add the suffix ER. So sad becomes sadder. And for superlative, you add the suffix est. So here we have saddest. So simply, according to rule number 3, the adjective sad, which is in the positive degree, has the comparative form sadder and the superlative form saddest. So this is rule number 3. Let us move ahead with the next rule. Rule number 4. When a word ends with two consonants, you need to add ER for comparative and EST for superlative. So we know that there are 5 vowels in English language and rest all 21 letters are called consonants. So here in rule number 4, we have to focus on consonants. So let us understand rule number 4 with the help of example. The example in the positive degree is small. So here if we look at rule number 1, it says that when there is an adjective, now here this a word represents an adjective, definitely of course. So when you have an adjective which ends with two consonants, so this is an adjective and this adjective ends with L once and L the second time. So we can say the consonant L has been repeated twice. So since this word small ends with two consonants, we can apply rule number 4 here. So according to rule number 4, if the adjective ends with two consonants, for comparative, you keep the main adjective as it is and simply add er. So small becomes smaller. And for superlative, keep the main adjective as it is and simply add est. So small becomes smallest. So definitely positive is small, comparative is smaller, and superlative is smallest. Let us look at another example. Here we have the adjective young. Unlike the first example, in this adjective, we have the adjective ending with two different consonants. The first consonant is N and the second is G. But again, since this adjective ends with two consonants, we can apply rule number 4 here as well. So, for comparative, we keep the main adjective as it is and simply add er, so young becomes younger. And for superlative, we add est, so we have youngest. So, young, younger, and youngest. So this is rule number 4, where we focus mostly on the use of consonants at the end of a given adjective. Let us move to the next rule. Rule number 5 says that some words do not follow any rules at all. So there are a few mischievous adjectives which do not follow any rule, neither rule number 1, nor rule number 2, and nor rule number 3 or 4. So what do we do with these adjectives? So we are smarter, right? So what have we done? We have grouped them and we alter the form, right? So for example, you have an adjective in the positive degree, which is good. She is a good girl. Good is a describing word. It is an adjective in the positive degree. But we cannot say gooder or goodest, or we cannot apply any other rule over here. So what have we done? We have altered the word. So good becomes better in comparative, and in superlative it becomes best. So it is good, better, best. Similarly, we have another word, another adjective, bad, right? Now bad also cannot be badder or baddest, or baddier or baddiest. So what have we done? We have come up with an alternative. So bad is positive, worse is comparative, and worst is superlative. Okay, and finally we have the third one. The third is mostly used as prefix with some other additional adjectives. We will come to that. It is much, positive, more is comparative, and most is superlative. Okay, so this is how we convert adjectives which do not follow any rule. Now let us see the last and the final rule. The last rule says that when words have three or more vowel sounds, then before the word add more for comparative and most for superlative. So again, in rule number 6, we are focusing on the use of vowel sounds. But remember what it says. When you have an adjective which has three or more vowel sounds, which has three or more vowels, then you keep that adjective as it is. For comparative, before that adjective we have to add more. And for superlative, before the adjective we will add most. Let us look at an example. So we have an adjective in the positive degree which is dangerous. Now this is the three vowel adjective. We have not three, actually we have four vowels here. We have the first vowel A, here it is. Then we have the second vowel E. Then we have the third vowel O. And finally we have the fourth vowel U. So rule number 6 says that when you have an adjective which has three or more vowels, like in the case of dangerous, so to make this positive degree adjective comparative, you will keep this adjective as it is, but before the adjective you will add more for comparative and most for superlative. So in the comparative degree, dangerous becomes more dangerous, and in superlative it becomes most dangerous. Okay. Now we have another example. In the positive degree we have an adjective expensive. Now let us see if it has three or more vowels or not. So we have E, the first vowel. We have the second E here. We have an I here, and we have E again, right? So there are three or more vowel sounds that you can hear basically, right? So we will follow this rule number 6 over here. So from positive, to make it comparative, we keep the word expensive as it is, and for comparative we add more before the adjective, and for superlative we add most, right? So this is the last rule of the degrees of comparison that we have already discussed long time back. So let us quickly revise what we have discussed today. So today we have basically discussed, since we already have spoken about what are adjectives and what are degrees of comparison. So today in our session we have only focused on the different rules that we will apply when we are dealing with degrees of comparison. So let us quickly revise all the 6 main rules. Rule number 1 says that when you have words, that is when you have adjectives whose last letter is E, then to make it comparative, you will add R after the adjective, and to make it superlative, you will add ST after the adjective. Rule number 2 says that when you have adjectives which have the last letter Y, so before converting it to comparative or superlative, you will first replace that last letter Y with the letter I, and after you have done the replacement, for comparative you will add the suffix ER, and for superlative you will add the suffix EST. That is your rule number 2. Next we discussed rule number 3, which said that when you have words or adjectives which have a short sound, that is which have only one vowel, before you convert that positive adjective to comparative or superlative, you are going to repeat the last letter of that positive degree adjective. That is, you're going to write the last letter of the positive degree adjective twice, and then you will add the suffix ER to make it comparative, and you will add the suffix EST to make it superlative. So these are the first 3 rules that we have spoken of. Next, we spoke of rule number 4. When a word has 2 consonants, after the word directly add ER for comparative and EST for superlative. So when you have a word, an adjective which has 2 consonants at the end, consecutively, the second last and last letter are consonants, there you will keep the adjective as it is, and for comparative you will add er after the adjective. For superlative you will add est after the adjective. So this is rule number 4. Next we spoke of rule number 5, where we saw that there are some very naughty adjectives which do not follow any rule, and therefore we alter the form of those adjectives, for which we have already seen a table. Lastly, we spoke about rule number 6, which said that when an adjective has 3 or more than 3 vowels, then before that adjective you will add the prefix more to make it comparative, and you will add the prefix most to make it superlative. So these are the 6 basic rules that we need to focus on when we are talking about adjectives in the positive, comparative or superlative degree. Mostly when we are trying to identify which adjective falls in which degree of comparison, or when you are trying to convert one adjective from one degree to another degree. So these are the 6 basic main rules that we all need to remember. So I hope that we all have enjoyed the session today, and we have also understood this very simple, interesting, but yet again an important topic of our English grammar. So thank you all for joining me today, and take care all of you.